Quick background, name is Felix Hartmann, managing partner of Hartmann Capital. I started in a crypto firm. Initially, it was a crypto hedge fund, started 5 years ago. Very simple, then grew it over the years to about 50 million in assets. Also launched a metaverse venture fund, which is more applicable to what we're discussing today. Metaverse VC, where we invest in game studios, companies like DressX that are here, digital fashion, infrastructure for the metaverse, like VR, AR, and so forth. And of course, also we have an NFT allocation within the fund.
Hello everyone again, my name is Daniel. I wanted to say thank you all for joining us today. I'm the co-founder of Solidity Group. We're an accelerator that focuses on the Web3 and more recently the AI space. And what we do is we take on projects that kind of mix the technical world and the real world to allow for a more efficient, more robust, more secure future in various different sort of spaces ranging from military to commercial real estate to private real estate, as well to other assets such as diamonds and gold.
And so I think actually a really interesting way to run this conversation today is that we have two very different views of real world NFTs. I'm somebody that subscribes to NFTs and most of crypto is meant for the digital world, like for a digitally native world where it makes more sense to represent digital goods via NFTs and not blend those two worlds because you still have a custody issue. Meanwhile, Bron, is very much focused on this world, so we're going to make it a little bit of a debate.
Absolutely. I did prepare a few questions for us if we want to start off with those.
Sure.
Just put them up here. So to begin, I think it'd be great. Well, first we have a third guest joining us, so I'd love for her to introduce herself. I think you should start talking. Yeah.
Yeah, hi guys. My name is Manana.
It's good to meet you.
Yes, guys.
Just if you can give a bit of an intro on yourself.
Yeah, guys. Actually, I finished my PhD, and they just to do like the family fund for the crypto more than like the 5 years. Yeah, and just like they wanted to do something for the artificial intelligence. I was one of the traders, quantum traders. Yeah, and I was host of on MTV and like the media person too. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think to kick it off, it'd be great to start off by asking a few questions. To begin, and this goes out to both of you, what is the current state of NFTs? And more so, what is the potential of NFTs, in your opinion, in regards to tokenization of real world assets, and more broadly overall?
All right. So overall, I think NFTs had a very similar phase like ICOs did in 2017. In 2017, we launched tokens for everything. Some of you might remember there was something called DentaCoin, which was the Bitcoin of the dentist industry. It took us a couple years to realize we didn't need that, right? But initially, we had tokens for the dog industry, the dentist industry, and so forth. Something similar happened, I think, with NFTs in 2021, where everybody and their mother launched NFTs. I mean, really, like you could look far and wide, and people were just like minting, and everybody thought that everything has value. And I myself bought some things where now I look back and like, did you really spend 10 ETH on that, right? But now we've had this washout process, right? Where I think we're coming back to reality. Some NFTs have sold off. Others have really held up incredibly. I mean, even like CryptoPunks, Bored Apes, and so forth, they're still worth 6 figures today after everything that happened. And at the same time, we saw virtual land get thrown some challenges where people thought, okay, virtual real estate, it's like the land grab. It's New York City real estate right now. But then we realized, wait a second, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 24 different open worlds, and if nobody's there might not be value either, right? Because ultimately, there's a saying, location, location, location. Well, the same thing applies to the metaverse. What is location defined by? People being present. And so I think the state of NFTs is we've had this great party in 2021. The hangover happened. We're all getting a little bit more sober now. We're looking around what actually has real value, what is real, and what is not. And now we're building on the foundation of that.
Absolutely, thank you. How about yourself?
Yeah, guys. Actually, like my journey with the NFT started like that. Then father of Vitalik Buterin, he sent me CryptoKitties, and it was so funny. I'm like the sold one for the 10,000, and it was like so complicated for me, like how it can be for the Bank of America, how I can explain what is like the NFT and like these kitties. It was tradable. And because it's like the down market right now, and they have too much cases. For example, they can use NFT like for the government dogs, right? They can use this like for the buildings too. For example, like for the DAO, they can actually invest together in these buildings, and it can be like the more transparency, for the data, for example. And too much cases coming from if they wanted to do, like the Pat's design for the fashion, for example, yeah, or for the metaverse too. It's like so funny if I have like my actual skin for the voices, for my real voice, and for the metaverse too, for the games, it's like it starts so easy, the Roblox, you know, and right now like too much games, too much metaverses, and like my point, like the future, because probably in next 5-6 months, guys, for example, like AWS, like Amazon, they wanted to do marketplace for the NFT, and it's huge actually for the companies like the NBC Universal, like the music too, Warner Music, for example, they to do the DressX, right? This integration, how actually the musician can use fashion, like the real fashion, for the followers, and actually virtual, like the agreement NFTs, and it's huge opportunities because it's tradable, first of all, right? You can be like you can proof of ownership. This is mine, and like my journey like started because like like my father, he's gone, and it was for me like so crazy how I can like use actually his watches, you know, and it was like expensive like the watches, and it was easy to do like the proof of this is watches from Switzerland, you know, or like the expensive bags too. It's like the proof of original this object. It's like and right now then like the huge companies coming, huge brands, and it's so valuable for the users, right?
Yeah, to add on to what you were saying, I think early on in the year, or last year, to be more specific, when a lot of these brands were doing these NFT things, it wasn't necessarily to actually provide some sort of real value. It was more so looked at, in my opinion, I'm sure you guys would agree, as a marketing play for everyone, because it was a big buzzword, and whoever was doing the metaverse got a bunch of free advertising. Versus now, we're heading into a space, like you were mentioning, where we're truly able to realize the potential of NFTs in the future and the type of things and the type of world we'll live in once it's fully integrated. And so being in my position as a co-founder, I come across a bunch of these very, very interesting projects. Notably, one of the more meaningful projects to myself, at least, is in the beginning stages of the Ukrainian war, which is very unfortunate. Ukraine became the first ever country in the world in history to fundraise using crypto. And so they were able to raise millions of dollars from all over the world, and they were able to actually collect that money and spend it in the span of a couple of minutes. Now, if any of you have ever done business overseas, and I'm sure all of you have, you know how much of a pain in the ass it is to send money overseas, and the delays and things of this nature. So it made it instant at a time when Ukrainians were fighting in the cold in shorts and a t-shirt, and they needed something to wear. Furthermore, we have had the privilege of working with projects that allowed us to go in and tokenize assets that are typically illiquid, such as diamonds, real estate, things of this nature, making it more liquid, creating a liquidity pool, and ultimately also lowering the barrier of entry for it. And so, to move forward, I wanted to ask you guys, as far as sectors, where do you think NFTs have the biggest impact, or will have the biggest impact? Which sector and why?
I mean, to me, it's the digital native world. What I mean by that is, I always make the comparisons, right? Like, especially with this specific panel, people tried in the early days of Bitcoin to say, why don't we just take a digital token and back it up by gold? That literally defeats the purpose, because now you have to have custody over a real world asset when it's something that can be digitally native, right? And so I think with NFTs, it's the same thing. People try to take, let's say, physical paintings and then put an what's called an NFC tag in the back and make it an NFT itself. But again, now you have the physical painting where it's like the next generation of art maybe is purely digital, right? I myself have like 3 different TVs hanging in my apartment where there's NFTs displayed on it. So I think the next generation of NFTs starts with gaming, actually, because the games are the centerpiece of metaverses, right? When you think of the early metaverses like Sandbox, Decentraland, you log on, raise of hands, how many of you have been on Decentraland?
Wow.
Okay. Of those of you, keep your hands up if you went there. Keep it up, okay. How many of you spent more than 5 minutes in it? That's actually impressive. And it's not to throw Decentraland on the bus, but I ask this question a lot, and usually the answer that I get is they spend like 2 minutes on it, they walk around, and there's not that much to do other than shout out to Central Games, which we have backed. There's like a poker arena essentially in Decentraland, but there's not that much to do. And so the solution to that is gaming, where you create a core game loop, people play it, and then you build a metaverse around it. You have a great game, you add an open world, you add a marketplace, you add, you can pretty much like make fan fiction, et cetera, and it grows. And of course, the heart of any game are items, collectibles. And I think that's where NFTs come in. But then you realize these items in a game have utility. It's not just a speculation. It's not just I'm going to mint something at 0.25 ETH, hoping I'm going to dump it on someone else for 2.5 ETH, right? Which is also why I love digital fashion, because there's people actually buying these things because they want to wear them on Instagram, they want to use them as a filter on Zoom, they want to like dress their avatars. So I think it's non-financial NFTs with real utility in metaverses.
And do you agree?
Yeah, and this is, yeah, I'm totally agree. And I want to actually continue like the story they for Korean. Yeah, I think like that this is huge impact. How actually you can donate, you know, and after that like you control this too.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a few different ways that Ukraine had raised money, a few different organizations, most notably Ukraine DAO had raised several million. And it was a fundamental change in terms of how fundraising has occurred, you know, historically in any wars, you know. And we were able to raise money with such an efficiency, such a speed, and such a scale that would never ever be possible with any sort of, you know, centralized third parties in place.
Exactly, like 5 years ago.
Exactly. Even 2 years ago, you know, it's a humongous change. And but to move back to what you were saying, I think it's important to note that I think a big mistake that a lot of these NFT projects have made is that I don't think you go out and make the NFTs, sell them, and then try to make a game that certain people like. I think the right approach is to make a game or take a game that already has players and is huge and integrate NFTs into them. Because like you were saying with the utility aspect, it only has utility if there's players and there's a big sort of liquid market for this. And I think the first time we ever saw this successfully done to a degree actually started, you know, years ago with the game Counter-Strike, when they integrated skins that individuals could, you know, buy of different rarities, and we saw the prices of those skins go to thousands of dollars. And so I think that was the first successful implementation, but you should note that Counter-Strike is one of the largest games in the world, and so it made sense for that to happen. And so I think there has to be a fundamental shift in thinking in terms of how you actually roll out these type of games.
And plus, you know, like the Felix, you invest in DressX, and they use actually for same Balenciaga outfits, you remember? And they support to the Ukraine too. It's like an amazing thing, like how you can to do this in real life, right? And impact this. And plus, from my point of view, I actually waiting something how they can impact finance industry, first of all. And plus how they can invest, because you know, like the Gen Z actually, it's more poor actually guys in last 15 years actually. It's look like how they can involve more young investors, right? And how they can make money, and probably it can be active or passive. It's really important, and plus voting too.
Yeah.
You know, like how they can actually support to our government, and probably docs too.
This all comes back to the idea, I think, that's at the center of Web3, which is an increase in accessibility to people, right? Because at the very base of what we're talking about here, which is non-fungible tokens and real-world assets, it's taking something that typically has a barrier of entry per se, maybe a couple $100,000 or several $1 million, and making the barrier of entry sell 100 to 1,000.
So let me chime in, Bron. Since I'm the one that's like in favor of more like digitally native, and you're the expert in this, let me ask you some questions because I would love to hear your feedback. Actually,
absolutely.
So, what's the appeal? So he's actually like, you know, put like diamonds, a DeLorean, like all kinds of like luxury goods as NFTs. What's the appeal for doing so beyond? Is it proving provenance? Is it what's the main appeal?
It depends. There's several different implementations. For example, the implementation that we were working on with Jacob and Co., as well as diamonds and things like this, it's all fundamentally different. When you're looking at something like watches, where it has to do with the brand, for Jacob, it was a bit of a different scenario because it wasn't just to ensure authenticity and get rid of the fact that you can, you know, fake paper documents, but it was also to solve one of Jacob's biggest problems, which is a lack of liquidity with his jewelry. And so through the use of actually bringing these things on chain, we were able to essentially control where users sell on the secondary market. And by bringing all these users together on one central place, you're able to actually create a more liquid market and increase the value of these watches in the secondary market without actually doing anything else. Then you move into diamonds or gold, let's say, which has historically been something used to hedge inflation, other things like that. There's a very different use case because you're going, for, let's say, gold. A kilogram of gold starts at $40,000, $50,000 minimum. Certain individuals don't have $40,000 to $50,000 to put into gold. And so you can take that single piece of gold and split it up into hundreds of pieces and allow people who typically wouldn't be able to participate in such a market to participate. So it's typically one of those two things.
And from a regulatory perspective, how is it, what jurisdiction serves it, so that you can then also financialize that token, meaning you can put in liquidity pool, you can borrow against it, and those things.
So typically, with projects where that was more so necessary, we've thankfully been able to do that in places like Ukraine, where the legislation is a lot more shiftable to actually what we're trying to do, and so that's been the case. And then as far as the diamond stuff and the DeLorean stuff, it's essentially, and I actually have my managing partner here in the law firm who could probably explain it better, but essentially, through the use of some creative tools, let's say, you can make it possible. There's various regulation filings you can do, things of that nature.
Excuse me. Linking NFTs to the physical world. Can you talk a little bit about what it might be like for a car company to take an NFT for each part of the car and bring it into one NFT so we can understand the provenance of every single component of the car?
So DeLorean had done it a bit of a different way. So with DeLorean, essentially, it started off as a base car that you could purchase that would essentially purchase yourself a slot, or a production slot within their production timeline. Once you go on and it's time for production, they had an option where you can go in and customize your car, and you do that through your NFT, and then that NFT that you have becomes custom to those features that you select, and it becomes a one-of-one version of your car, a one-to-one. Furthermore, once the cars go into development, there's an IoT system within the car that connects to the actual NFT, and it automatically uploads hundreds of metrics to that NFT right away. And so what this does at the high level, and what I think is the most useful, is the car market, the secondary car market, typically is a very unpredictable place. You really don't know what you're buying unless you're going to very, very reputable people, and with this, you know exactly what you're buying, from previous owner history to changes in whatever, any service history, anything. It just brings it essentially combines all of the information that's typically spread up all over the place into one central point.
Yeah, and for the supply chain too. They use for the supply and for the dynamic NFTs. You can change the metadata.
Yeah, so actually, this is a version, another thing with Ukraine is the entire contracting system, from going to submitting documents to uploading various end user certificates, things like that. That's all done on chain, and what it's able to do is actually just make everything fully transparent. And why that's important is, countries overseas, especially, countries like Ukraine happen to be very corrupt, unfortunately, and it's a way to actually for us to ensure that we ensure the money gets to the right places.
Yeah. I mean, part of the challenge with that approach is that you would need to get every single part maker to also partake in, every time they produce something to put on the blockchain, because otherwise you don't have a data set to test it against. What I mean by that is, the NFT creation simply is a point in time. It doesn't mean that the entry is correct, right? Like, I can create an NFT right now and say, I create this watch and it's an AP. Just because I said it's an AP doesn't make an AP, right? And then somebody could down the line check and say, oh, look, the NFT says it's an AP. Well, again, it only matters if the company behind it acknowledges that it is. And so you'd need every single part maker to partake in that as well, which I'm sure it's coming, but it's happening step by step. But you are seeing, the first major companies do supply chains on the blockchain, do rewards programs with NFTs on blockchain, like Starbucks create a whole new rewards program using NFTs. Yeah. Loyalty programs and so forth.
Yeah, it's plus the huge things. It's look like a Tesla style, it's all about energy too.
So I know we have 5 minutes left, so maybe we should open it up.
Yeah, guys, if you have a question. Yeah. Chain
yeah.
Of
blockchain.
Yeah.
It's through blockchain, yes.
On chain.
Hold up. Be more specific. You mean if you have a physical device, how do you tie the NFT to it?
So it's a combination of off-chain and on-chain ramps that do it. I can't speak on the specific details because I don't write the actual code. So I wouldn't want to tell you something that isn't fully accurate.
Yeah, they actually use this case for the voices. But yeah, they're mostly our storages and our ML side, all about the centralized data. But they can use the data lakes, like a Databricks, for example. And plus, yeah, you can use, first of all, on-chain, yeah, and off-chain too. Or it's independent, how sensitive your data You know, if you talk about like for the cars, for example, they use blockchain and voice for like open this car. You know, like this is cloud. It's like they should protect the user. This is why they use the blockchain.
Yeah, and then you can like include things like ZK rollups and things of that nature that actually allow all that data to stay private while still being on the blockchain.
It's independent like the data too. If it's unstructured or structured, you can use like a Filecoin too.
Yeah, I mean, most NFTs they only have very limited storage capacity. Most of them have a link to like an IPFS address or to an AR-weave address where then the actual image is stored. For example, like if we just talk about an image NFT, but you can store metadata in it and pretty much like a link that links to somewhere else. Yeah.
So, going back to the car example, in my mind, I'm thinking real-world assets. I'm connecting that to digital twins, right? Just the car parts, they could all be digital twins, and the digital twin could be on-chain or off-chain, whatever it is. Just reading the title, why do we need NFTs here? What is that NFTs do which digital twins cannot do, or vice versa?
Multiple things. I mean, you've one, the provenance aspect, that you can prove that it's actually authentic, right? So for example, that very expensive piece of the car is actually real and not just like some rip-off. And then two, if we don't talk about the cards and the logistics, the supply chain aspect of it, but rather the store value that like a old-timer car could be, liquidity. You could sell that NFT, you could borrow against that NFT using DeFi, you could maybe split it up into 10 fractional NFTs and sell a portion of it if you need liquidity, which a digital twin wouldn't cover.
I think you're getting into the core of this, and I think at a high level, the reason why doing something like this is so valuable is because you're able to then actually take this to a second step and be able to create real decentralized lending platforms while also having on the back end NFTs a real world value to actually be able to insure those things.
For the insurance too, yeah, and for the lending. But it's like for the expensive cars. For example, like for the Germany, they do this for the Mercedes, for the BMW, and for the actually some of the American cars too. But it's for the expensive, yeah, and it's mostly like you're right, digital twins. But they use like the specific data, and for my case, they use like the voices for the KYC. Like the light KYC.
The validation part, I totally agree. And I think it also comes down to the value, the asset value, which actually makes NFT a better choice rather than digital twins.
Exactly.
So that's a good point. Thank you.
And it probably makes most sense for like luxury goods. It's not every item will need an NFT behind it because it does add extra cost to making them.
And plus, like in US, they have 3 million electric cars, and in next like the 5 years, it's gonna be more, and it's so huge, like the impact because it's climate. And they use like a GPU too, like the energy, and it's like a huge impact for the blockchain, definitely.
Okay, we have time for one more question, if there's anyone.
One more question.
No?
No.
Well, anyways, thank
Guys,
you
if you
everyone
have
for
questions about like probably guys, they have a like venture capital firm, they can talk about like what is the next big thing. What is the next big thing? What do you think?
It's actually we're betting really hard right now on VR.
VR, guys.
Because a lot of the stuff, like we're interfacing with crypto and NFTs and everything right now, just like through the 2D layer. That does mean that those two worlds cannot cross, and so maybe 50 to 70% of our investments last year were all in the AR VR space. So from virtual concerts to like the Figma, like prototyping tools for VR, VR game development studios, and so forth. Apple's bringing out their headset this year. The Quest 3 is dropping in Q3. There's a lot of like tailwinds to really accelerate that market in my eyes.
How actually like that they combine like the new technologies like that, and what you're looking for you actually, like a best portfolio company?
That's a long question. I think ultimately it does boil down to an amazing founder operating in blue ocean where they're doing something completely new versus just doing the same idea over. That being said, happy to discuss afterwards. We got 10 seconds left, and I think she's ready to announce the next one. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.